My $12,000 custom ATV. The one thing that reliably gets me to my VA appointments without having to beg anybody for a ride, got stolen out of my own driveway, and the thief didn't even have the decency to feel guilty about it. She live-streamed herself doing donuts in my yard like it was Coachella, laughing her head off while her mom, the HOA president, stood there smiling like she'd just won a prize. Yeah, that kind of morning. It started with this weird, hollow quiet. You know, that silence that feels wrong before your brain can explain why I rolled up the garage door, just like I do every day. The desert air still cool, creosote and dust in the breeze. And I swear I felt my stomach drop before my eyes even landed on the spot. Empty. No ATV, no warm metal ticking from the engine cooling down, no faint gasoline smell that usually hangs in the air, like a little reminder of freedom, just bare concrete, like someone had erased me. And then I saw the lawn. Fresh tire marks, deep and ugly, spinning circles carved into my grass like a signature. Like whoever did it wanted me to know it wasn't just theft, it was a message. Right on cue, an engine roared past my house, and I watched my own ATV shoot down the street under a girl I recognized instantly. Brooklyn Thornfield, 19 years old, phone held up high, camera pointed at her face, laughing like she was the star of some little suburban crime show. Gravel popped across my driveway. And there, by her perfectly trimmed mailbox, stood her mom, Delilah Thornfield, the president of the Willowbrook Estates HOA, posture perfect, hair perfect, smile perfect, except the smile didn't reach her eyes. She didn't yell at her kid, didn't pretend to be shocked, didn't act confused. She smirked and then, clear as day, she called out, "Deal with it." I didn't sprint after the ATV. I didn't scream. I didn't do the dramatic movie thing where you chase a vehicle on foot like that ever works. I just stood there, because something about that smirk told me this wasn't random, it was planned, and I knew, right then, this wasn't going to be a simple call the cops and file a report kind of problem. They said she was untouchable. They forgot one thing: I'm a combat engineer, and I don't chase thieves. I set traps. But to make any of this make sense, you've got to rewind with me 8 months back to when I thought Willowbrook Estates was going to be my clean slate, my quiet place, my fresh start. After 2 tours overseas and a rehab timeline that felt like it was written by somebody who'd never had to rebuild a life from scratch, I wanted boring, I wanted predictable, I wanted the kind of neighborhood where people complain about paint colors and not gunfire. Willowbrook looked like that. 800-something homes, sidewalks that actually got swept, flags that actually came down after the holidays, the kind of place where the quiet feels like a gift. My VA therapist leaned forward one day, eyes kind but direct, and said, "Garrett, build something." I asked her what she meant, and she said, "Anything, something with your hands, something you control." Control, that word hit harder than it should have. Because Afghanistan didn't just take my lower leg, what it really tried to take was control. So I bought an old ATV frame at a farm auction outside Mesa. Rusted, bent, forgotten, and if I'm being honest, it looked a lot like how I felt. For 8 months, my garage became my therapy room. I designed custom hand controls because foot pedals weren't an option anymore. Throttle moved to my left grip, rear brake modified for hand pressure, suspension adjusted so the weight shift from my prosthetic didn't throw me sideways like a rag doll. Every bolt I tightened felt deliberate, like I wasn't just rebuilding a machine, I was rebuilding my nervous system, one careful click at a time. The seat took the longest. I molded it around the socket of my prosthetic, reinforced pressure points, adjusted angles until it stopped bruising me, stopped reminding me with every bump that my body had been rewritten without my permission. The first time I rode it without pain, I didn't celebrate, I didn't post a photo, I just sat in my driveway and breathed like my lungs had been waiting months for permission. And that ATV wasn't some weekend toy. It got me to VA appointments without calling a friend. It got me to the grocery store without walking a half mile through a parking lot that feels like a desert battlefield when you're balancing on a prosthetic. It got me across trails where long-distance walking is a cruel joke. Independence, that's what it was. Most neighbors didn't care. One guy, Carlos Vega, the pool maintenance contractor, once nodded at it and said, "That thing looks serious." I took that as a compliment. For a while, life was steady, then I made one mistake. I'd taken the ATV out early to test a brake adjustment, came back, parked it inside the garage, and left the garage door open. 5 minutes, maybe less. Engine still warm, ticking softly as it cooled, heat trapped in the concrete needing to vent normal stuff, harmless stuff. That afternoon, a white envelope was taped to my front door. Official HOA letterhead. Violation notice. Bylaw 47C. Unauthorized vehicle storage. $500 per day after 72 hours. I stood there holding it, replaying that morning, and the only conclusion was the obvious one: somebody wasn't just driving by and noticing somebody was watching. I read the notice again and felt it. The language wasn't neutral, it wasn't informational, it was sharp, almost eager, like whoever wrote it had been excited to pin something on me. And right there in bold, Delilah Thornfield, HOA president. That's when it clicked: this wasn't about a vehicle. This was about power. In Willowbrook, the quiet wasn't peace, it was surveillance. I didn't panic. I know that might sound weird, but after war, a letter taped to your door doesn't spike your pulse the way it does for other people. It sharpens you like a blade getting honed. I read Bylaw 47C carefully. It was meant for commercial stuff: delivery trucks, landscaping trailers, construction equipment. My ATV was registered as a personal mobility vehicle, and I had documentation from the VA stating it was medically necessary adaptive equipment. Federal disability protections applied. So I made copies, checked the HOA site, and showed up to the next board meeting 10 minutes early. Community center smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and stale coffee. Folding chairs, plastic table up front, and there she was, Delilah Thornfield, 48, perfect posture, perfect hair, perfect smile that never made it to her eyes. When my violation came up, she read it like she was reading the weather: unauthorized vehicle storage visible from public roadway. Visible, that word again. I raised my hand, calm, polite: ma'am, the garage door was open for 5 minutes. The vehicle is ADA protected adaptive equipment. I have documentation. I handed copies down the table, paper rustling. Board members actually looked. Delilah didn't. She looked at me like I was an inconvenience that had learned to speak. Mr. Steele, she said, that polite HOA voice people use right before they try to ruin your week. Recreational vehicles are recreational vehicles. We must maintain standards. It's not recreational, I said. It's how I get to my VA appointments. A little ripple went through the room, like people suddenly remembered I was a human being and not a line item, and then the back door opened. Heels on linoleum, unhurried, like an entrance. Brooklyn Thornfield walked in like she was stepping onto a stage, designer sneakers, phone already raised, camera angled right at me. "Mom," she said loudly, to her phone as much as to her mother, "is this the military guy you were telling me about?" A few nervous chuckles. Delilah's smile tightened like a belt pulled one notch too far. "We're discussing a resident," Delilah said smoothly, "who believes his situation gives him special privileges." Special privileges? I kept my voice even. "I'm asking for equal application of the rules. That bylaw applies to commercial equipment, and I've noticed real estate signage and staging inventory stored in your garage for years." The air changed. Brooklyn stopped smiling. Board members shifted. Delilah's fingers tapped the table once, controlled. "That is temporary business material," she said. "Entirely different." "How?" I asked. Silence, and Brooklyn leaned toward her phone, smirking. "Guys, he's comparing my mom's business to his little toy truck." Toy truck? They voted 4-3 to table the violation pending review. Not a win, not a loss, but I heard them outside afterward, not even whispering. Brooklyn laughed, careless: "He'll fold. They always do." Delilah's response was calm, certain: "If he doesn't, we have other options." That's when I understood enforcement wasn't the point. Control was. And then the harassment started, quiet at first, like dripping water meant to drive you insane. 3 days later, my phone buzzed while I was sitting in a VA waiting room. Violation notice. Loud engine disturbance reported at 2:14 a.m. My ATV hadn't moved in 2 days. Then more oil spill in driveway, unauthorized mechanical activity, suspicious late-night noise, all anonymous, all time-stamped while I was either at the VA or asleep. And then I stepped outside one morning and saw black spray paint across the lenses of my exterior cameras, not smashed, not ripped down, sprayed clean and deliberate, like whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. That night, around 10, engines roared down our usually dead-quiet street. Dirt bikes, a Jeep with underglow lights, music blasting, laughter that didn't belong in a neighborhood with estates in the name. Brooklyn stood on the foot pegs of a dirt bike, phone raised, filming like it was a party. She revved, gravel sprayed across my lawn, and a beer can slammed into my garage door. Metal rang like a warning bell. She shouted over the noise, "Nice ATV, and there'd be a real shame if something happened to it." I called HOA security. The line rang twice, and her voice answered. "Thornfield residents." "Not security." "Delilah." Mrs. Thornfield, I said, steady, holding the phone out so she could hear the engines. There's a noise violation on Maple Ridge property damage. A pause, then she exhaled like I was exhausting her. We've received no such reports. You can hear it from my porch. Another pause longer, then she said my first name, syrupy sweet. Garrett, have you spoken to your VA counselor recently? My spine went cold. PTSD can cause heightened sensitivity to noise, she continued, even distortions. Another beer can hit the garage harder. I held the phone out so she could hear it. Silence, then a soft chuckle. If you feel unsafe, she said, perhaps Willowbrook isn't the right fit for you. Click. They stayed another hour, circling, revving, never crossing a clean legal line, just dancing on it, trying to make me react. That was their mistake. Because I know what weaponized pressure looks like: confusion as a strategy, isolation as a tactic, and I also know this emotion wastes energy. Preparation wins wars. So I stopped responding. No emails. No calls. No arguments. I drove 40 minutes outside the city and paid cash for trail cameras, infrared, motion-triggered, the kind hunters use, and I mounted them where the old cameras used to be, hidden, camouflaged, redundant, one in a vent cover, one in a fake irrigation box, one along the roofline. Then I pulled apart the seat of my ATV, found the cavity in the frame, and tucked a GPS tracker inside Matchbox, small, 30-day battery. Real-time cellular ping sealed it back up, so clean you'd have to dismantle the chassis to find it. Then the kill switch, that took patience. I routed a relay into the ignition line, tested it over and over, on, off, synced it to a locked app on my phone. One tap, engine dead. Doesn't matter if the keys, and doesn't matter if they're moving. One tap, and the machine goes silent. By midnight, my garage looked normal. Concrete, tools, workbench, ATV sitting there like always. But now it wasn't just transportation. Now it was bait, and I wasn't reacting anymore. I was controlling variables. And then the twist showed up on my doorstep, wearing a pool maintenance shirt. Carlos Vega stood there, shifting his weight, nervous eyes. Mr. Steele, you got a minute? He didn't sit, just stayed near the door like the walls might have ears. I've been doing pool contracts here 6 years, he said quietly. Prices didn't triple overnight, but the invoices say they did. He told me about emergency repairs that always went to the same preferred vendors connected to Thornfield management, and the numbers made my stomach turn. $47,000 for a roof patch that should have cost $12,000, he said, swallowing like he hated even saying it out loud. That's not sloppiness, that's a system. Later that afternoon, another knock. Meredith Hendress, 73, retired public school teacher with posture like a ruler, holding a manila folder like she'd been waiting her whole life to use it. I taught civics for 32 years, she said, eyes sharp. This isn't governance, it's extraction. Inside the folder, emails, budgets, board summaries, highlighted line items, 3 years of records. That's when I finally saw the real shape of what I was in. This wasn't just Delilah bullying me for fun. This was racketeering dressed up in beige stucco and community standards. And systems leave patterns. 2 nights later, Carlos and I met near the HOA office dumpsters before trash pickup. No headlights, no loud doors, just the smell of stale coffee grounds and cleaning chemicals and shredded paper that wasn't even crosscut, lazy strip shredding, like they assumed no one would ever dig. Back in my garage, an old army buddy of mine, Jake, cybersecurity guy, laid the strips out like a puzzle, fingers moving fast. A couple hours later he leaned back, eyes hard. Found it: contract amendment, emergency roofing services, $47,000, vendor linked to Thornfield Holdings LLC, same registered agent as Delilah's real estate brokerage. Meredith didn't even flinch, she just said quietly, self-dealing. Jake pulled up county filings. She's tied to 23 HOA communities across Arizona. 23. That's when my violation letter stopped feeling personal. It was just the Thornfields feeding, and I had accidentally become the one person stubborn enough to bite back. Meredith looked at me and said, almost casual, I already talked to someone at Channel 12. And that's how Cassidy Walsh entered the story. Not with a camera crew, not with drama, just coffee in a diner booth off Route 60, a yellow legal pad, and eyes that said she'd been waiting. When I laid out the contracts and the overlap and the harassment, she nodded slowly. We've been tracking her for 8 months, she said. Financial Crimes Unit has a preliminary file, but paper fraud moves slow. I asked why Delilah wasn't in handcuffs already. Cassidy leaned back, because white-collar cases need leverage subpoenas. Warrants, judges want clean probable cause. What qualifies? I asked. She held my gaze, a felony in real time tied to intimidation or civil rights. Then she said the words that made the whole room feel smaller. Your ATV is registered adaptive medical equipment under ADA protections. If someone steals it publicly, while mocking your disability, that changes everything. Paper crimes take time. Public felony creates urgency. And in my head, I saw Brooklyn's grin, heard toy truck, saw beer cans bouncing off my garage. She loved reckless decisions, which meant sooner or later she'd hand us leverage with a bow on it. A few nights after that, my phone buzzed at 3:47 a.m. motion detected. I watched the live feed, infrared turning the world ghost gray, and there she was, Brooklyn, hood up, gloves on, crouched at my side garage door with a lockpick set. Not drunk, not sloppy, focused. My heart didn't race. It slowed. She worked the lock like she'd practiced minute after minute, and I could have ended it right there, called 911, sent Cassidy the clip, watched this turn into a rich kid caught trespassing story that Delilah would spin into a pity parade. Instead, I tapped one button. Floodlights snapped on, blinding white. Brooklyn froze, looked right at the camera for half a second, face clear as day, then sprinted into the passenger seat of a waiting SUV that rolled away dark, no headlights, like a cockroach disappearing under a fridge. I replayed the footage twice. Attempted burglary, conspiracy, criminal trespass. Easy. But not enough. Because stopping a thief was small. Collapsing an empire that required patience. So the next morning, I didn't change the locks. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't call the cops. I made coffee, and I staged a little theater. At 10, I rolled the ATV out into my driveway, slow and visible, sunlight catching the frame, and I taped a white board to the handlebars in big black letters. For sale. At noon, Carlos came by, and we played our parts. I raised my voice just enough to travel. I'm done. Carlos, guy from Mesa, is coming tomorrow morning to buy it. Carlos hesitated half a beat. Believable, probably for the best, not worth fighting. City Hall. Across the street, Delilah's blinds shifted. By late afternoon, a dark SUV rolled by, twice slow as a predator. Good. Deadlines make reckless people move fast. That night, after sunset, I rolled the ATV back into the garage and left the garage door wide open, lights off. For sale sign still visible under the streetlight like a neon invitation. Inside the house, I checked my phone. Trail cams active, infrared ready, GPS synced, kill switch armed, cloud uploads verified. Redundancy layered on redundancy. If Brooklyn wanted her victory lap, her little social media moment, she had to take it now. At 11:02 p.m., my phone vibrated. GPS movement detected. I walked to the garage like I was checking the weather, and the space was empty. She took it. I didn't call 911. I opened Instagram. Brooklyn was live. Thousands watching. Phone mounted on my handlebars, wind in her hair, laughing. Guess the crazy vet finally gave up, thanks for the donation, soldier boy. Comments flew by, queen behavior, untouchable. Ride it like you own him. She headed straight for the Willowbrook Country Club, like she was drawn to a stage light. And when I pulled into the edge of that parking lot, I didn't even need to look for her. I could hear the engine revving, the music, the crowd laughing. She was doing tight circles by the valet, string lights above, people filming, phones out, the perfect little circus. I stayed in my truck, watched through the windshield, watched through my phone GPS. Steady. And then she said it, loud, clear, recorded broadcast. Maybe next time he'll remember his place. That wasn't just theft. That was disability-based humiliation, public, documented, tied to the pattern. I opened the app. One red button. I pressed it. On screen, RPM dropped to 0. In real life, the engine died mid-rev, like somebody cut the cord to reality. Brooklyn yanked the throttle again, nothing. Hit the starter, dead. Her smile faltered, confusion replacing confidence, like someone had swapped masks. And that's when the black SUVs slid into the lot. No sirens. No drama. Just precision. Doors opened before they fully stopped. Men and women in plain clothes stepping out with that unmistakable posture, the kind you don't learn at a desk. FBI, financial crimes. Brooklyn Thornfield, an agent called, voice calm as steel. Step off the vehicle. Her mouth open like she still thought this was a prank. My dad knows the mayor. Step off the vehicle, hands visible. She looked around for someone to fix it, to override it, to restore the world where her mom's title made her bulletproof. No one came. The cuffs clicked clean, sharp, loud. The live stream kept running, her own audience watching her get folded into reality. Felony grand theft, the agent said, unlawful possession of adaptive medical equipment, and civil rights violations. I watched her face change when the word felony landed, like she'd never imagined consequences could have weight. Somebody in the crowd grabbed her phone. Still broadcasting final image was her in cuffs, my ATV behind her, agents everywhere. A federal arrest captured by her own vanity. My phone buzzed, a text from Cassidy. Search warrant executed, Thornfield residence secured. That was the real target. Because the moral of this whole mess, the thing I didn't understand until I was standing there under country club string lights listening to a rich kid's world crack, is that power doesn't come from being loud, it comes from being insulated from believing there's always a cushion between you and consequences. And people like the Thornfields don't fall because somebody yells louder than them. They fall because someone turns the lights on and keeps receipts. When I drove back into Willowbrook, red and blue lights reflected off stucco walls and trimmed hedges, and Delilah's big corner house, Standard, looked a lot smaller under federal lighting. Agents carried boxes out of her garage like it was inventory, computers, banker boxes, file crates, not chaos evidence. Delilah stood at the top of her marble steps with a phone to her ear, snapping orders like the universe was still obligated to listen. Put the mayor on now. Nobody moved faster. An agent read from a clipboard, federal search warrant authorized under Title 18. Delilah tried to protest, to posture, to do that HOA thing where intimidation is treated like a skill, and then she heard it. Judge Watson recused himself this afternoon. That's the moment her face shifted, subtle, but I saw it. Her local web of favors didn't reach this. And across the street, neighbors came out one porch light at a time, Carlos in his work boots, Meredith in a coat over her nightgown, people who'd stayed quiet for years now standing curbside just to witness the spell break. Carlos finally said it out loud. You charged us $800 for a $40 filter. Meredith followed, voice steady. You threatened families with liens while routing funds to your own companies. The lead agent stepped forward. Mrs. Thornfield, you are being detained for questioning in connection with conspiracy, wire fraud, and racketeering activity. Racketeering in a suburban HOA sounded ridiculous until you realized it wasn't. Delilah looked at me when they guided her down the driveway, cuffs clicking, and she tried one last shot of venom. You think you won? I didn't smile, didn't gloat. This was never about winning, I told her quietly. It was about records, and you kept plenty. And that's the satisfying part, if you're the kind of person who likes karma served cold. Her daughter already in federal custody, her own house being emptied into evidence vans, her untouchable world dissolving in front of the people she'd bullied into silence. 6 months later, Willowbrook looked the same. Palm trees, clean sidewalks, desert air rolling in at dusk, but it felt different. Fear was gone. Brooklyn took a plea, felony grand theft tied to disability harassment, time in federal custody, supervised release, community service, and her social media vanished like it was never real. Delilah didn't get that easy exit. Too much money, too many overlapping LLCs, too many contracts pointing back to her like arrows, RICO charges, prison time, seized assets, restitution that'll follow her longer than any HOA term ever could. And my ATV, it came home after evidence hold ended. Quiet Tuesday afternoon, no audience, just me rolling it back into the garage and hearing that soft engine hum like an old friend. People ask me if it was worth it, the stress, the risk, the waiting. Here's the truth, calling the cops would have stopped a thief. Letting the system reveal itself changed a community. Because real power isn't money, it isn't connections, it isn't a title on a letterhead. Real power is knowing the rules, knowing the law, knowing where arrogance gets sloppy, and having the patience to let people who think they're untouchable prove, publicly, that they're not. So here's the question that still messes with me, and I want you to actually sit with it. Where's the line between justice and setting a trap when you know someone's going to hurt you again? Is it moral to let it happen so you can stop them for good, or is that just another form of revenge wearing a nicer outfit? Drop your take in the comments. Tell me what you think is right, what you think is too far, and if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a bully, or somebody with power who thought rules didn't apply. I want to hear your story, because I promise you you're not the only one.